Hi, this is Ollie. Welcome to Possibility Space. Today I'm going to read you Playing with the Exterminationist Impulse in Cronos, the New Dawn. An old man, wrists bound, crushed into a thick pulp by tank tracks. A girl hung on a wall like a coat on a hook, legs turned to ribbons. A boy with a hollow skull. I've been watching this genocide for a few years now, and I keep wondering, what could bring a society to treat people like this? I sought answers in the dehumanizing statements of decision makers and their voters. I watched films and read histories of genocides all over the world. Intellectually, I was beginning to understand, but emotionally, the exterminationist impulse was still an enigma. Then, unexpectedly, I played a video game and I felt it. Cronos the New Dawn is a survival horror game set in the post-apocalyptic remains of Krakow, Poland. You play an unnamed traveller sent to this world of fog and ruin to learn more about the outbreak that ended it. The game's narrative is a time travel puzzle inspired by 12 Monkeys and Netflix's Dark. Piecing it together is one of the game's highest satisfactions. We won't spoil it here. What we're interested in isn't the game's narrative, but its ludonarrative. That is, the story that emerges from the moment-to-moment gameplay. Ludo, in Latin, meaning play. In short, Cronos intentionally induces the player to behave like a genocide heir. Like most horror games, it alternates between highly stressful sequences and periods of relative calm. What distinguishes it is what it asks you to do while you decompress. Burn the bodies. The game tells you to do this because monsters can merge with corpses, creating a hardened version of the same enemy. That doesn't turn out to be much of a threat, though. The post-game stats screen showed that I allowed only 12 enemies to merge with fallen foes. That is a tiny number of the disfigured demons I defeated during my playthrough, and I'm not even a particularly good shot. I realized quite early on that I didn't actually need to be doing this, but I still burned every last one. The game only lets you carry one unit of torch ammunition at a time, so the process is quite monotonous, requiring a lot of backtracking. Some critics felt that this was bad game design, but that wasn't my experience. Forcing me to stew in discomfort was the point. Running these refueling laps gave me time to come to a disturbing realization. I wasn't burning bodies for any discernible gameplay advantage, and I wasn't having fun per se. I was indulging a compulsion to cleanse. Watching the flames from the safety of my fireproof armor, I felt distant, decontaminated, and dominant. Burning the bodies didn't actually make me safer, but it made me feel more secure. My brain had linked fire to safety, and the game reinforced this connection by ensuring that refueling stations were softly lit, domestic settings. Some even had painstakingly animated cats for me to pet. Like it had for genocide heirs throughout history, purifying flame came to symbolize my mission. At this point in the article, I've included some quotations from genocide heirs throughout history to drive home the connection. Mehmet Talat Pasha, the architect of the Armenian genocide, said in 1915, "Burn, demolish, kill." Joseph Goebbels, chief propagandist of the Nazi Party, said in 1933, "Entrust to the flames the intellectual garbage of the past. It is a strong, great, and symbolic undertaking." General Efrain Rios Montt, the Guatemalan military dictator, said in 1982, "We don't have a policy of scorched earth, we have a policy of scorched communists." And Israeli politician Moshe Feiglin said only a couple of years ago, "A firestorm should wash over Gaza." I hate these people. I did not enjoy embodying even an approximation of their feelings. But if we hope to learn, de-radicalize, and prevent, then understanding them viscerally not just intellectually, is useful. Cronos contains another tool that elicits the exterminationist impulse, the integrity scanner. Mounted on the barrel of your weapon, this gadget lights up when pointed at any living being. It's the game training you to distrust the human form. Which is helpful because the outbreak that ended the world has also splattered amalgamated human flesh all over the walls. I spent an inordinate amount of time combing my crosshair over this tapestry of human flesh, waiting for the green light to open fire. I scanned what I thought was a protruding spine, only to realize it was actually a freakishly long series of interlocked fingers. I was twice disgusted. First, at the unexpected and uncanny array of anatomy. Secondly, that these people just held hands, presumably sung Kumbaya, then promptly died. Many didn't even try to fight it. My armoured suit cuts a striking silhouette. It sets me apart from these emaciated victims. The more I played, the more convinced of my supremacy I became. Game designers call this a power fantasy. Genocide heirs throughout history have laboured under similar delusions. Nazi Germany's Übermensch, Fascist Italy's New Man, the political soldier of Britain's National Front, the rugged individual of the American frontier, and Israel's vision of muscular Judaism. Max Nordau, one of Zionism's founding fathers, argued that living outside of Israel had fashioned Jews into, quote, crippled, timid figures with counterfeit selves who were hateful to all men of high standards. He called them degenerates and sought to regenerate them in the image of Spartans. His vision of muscular Judaism, suffused with visceral contempt for the diaspora Jewish mind, spirit, and even physiognomy, continues to inform Zionist thought. Toughness, aggressiveness, and battle readiness characterize Israeli identity. Never again, Israelis are told, will Jews go like lamb to slaughter. Never again can they let their guard down. Israel seeks to supplant the stereotype of the meek Yiddish-speaking Jew of the Eastern European shtetl with the Hebrew-speaking Sabra Jew who is always prepared to fend off would-be attackers, to secure and extend the perimeters of his land. Nordau's fantasy struck a chord with a victimized, decimated people, despite, or perhaps because, of its internalized anti-Semitism. It led Zionists to follow in the footsteps of their ethno-nationalist persecutors. In Cronos, as in Israel, exterminationist violence is coaxed out of you by systems intended to make you feel unsafe. Here's a real-world example of that from Israeli journalist Ben Caspit. Quote, I would have voted for Mamdani because I want everyone to make Aliyah. I'm a long-time, consistent supporter of anti-Semitism because I'm in favour of all Jews coming here. The difference between Israel and Cronos is that Cronos only provokes this impulse in order to teach you, at the very end, not to succumb to it. At every level of its design, Cronos uses the conventions and structure of the survival horror genre to evoke dread and elicit an exterminationist response. The game's resource economy, for example, is stingy and cruel. The margin between defending yourself and running out of ammunition and becoming defenseless is razor thin. You're heavily armored, but not nearly armored enough. This produces a permanent sense of precarity that incentivizes the player to smash, kill, and loot. It ends up driving frantic, stopgap ammunition purchases rather than the smarter choice, investing in lasting upgrades. There's a lesson here for austerity-minded politicians. The game's themes and systems align so perfectly that an instant of insecurity is even inserted between each gunshot. Your gun, you see, needs charging. This leaves you standing in place, helplessly watching monsters lumber closer and closer until the charge finally rips loose. Everywhere you look, it is tension and release, phobia met with force. all you see is monsters and all you need is kill. The developers of Cronos know exactly what they're doing. This is not some corpse-defiling simulator. It's an accomplished, gothic, humanist tale with a lot to say. I saw it through the lens of an ongoing genocide, but it is equally about Soviet totalitarianism, pandemic-induced misanthropy, closeness at the cost of pain, and about what happens when ideology fails. Successfully executing on all of its themes, both narratively and mechanically, it does something that few games manage. It grants the player the opportunity to hold their own actions in some degree of contempt, and to learn from them. It is one of the most accomplished survival horror games ever made, and it is the best game of 2025. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that and found it interesting. Here are some acknowledgements. This article owes a debt to Misery Loop, a critique of Cronos the New Dawn, which is a video essay by Noah Caldwell-Gervais. My article only addresses the Ludo narrative, but Gervais' video takes on the game's time-travelling narrative as well. I've also linked to a conversation about Zionist fear-mongering between Matt Bernstein, Matt Lieb, and Simone Zimmerman. The earlier quote from Ben Caspit about deliberately supporting anti-Semitism in the United States to drive American Jews to Israel comes from that conversation, and there are a lot of other citations like it. So if you're interested in the impact of that kind of fear-mongering and why people do it, that is a great conversation to listen to. Also, Eli Valley's book, The Museum of Degenerates, Portraits of the American Grotesque. I was reading this while I was playing Cronos, and it definitely informed my framing. The book, like Cronos, follows Max Nordau's vision to its horrifying logical conclusion as an act of critique. And lastly, my friend Matt Weddig, whose feedback massively improved the clarity and structure of this piece. Thank you for listening. Possibility Space is a listener-supported publication. If you would like to become a paid supporter, you can do that over on Substack, or you can just recommend to a friend or give us a 5-star review, or just subscribe. That really helps. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. See you next time.